Hey, it's Michael Ferrari with Nashville Music Network. We're so excited to get started with this podcast. We're going to be talking about the music night that's happening March 8th, and we hope that you can watch with us and just watch these podcast episodes, and you'll figure out what the whole thing is about. Thanks so much for being on this ride with us.
Well, I guess what we'd really love to talk to you about today, we've got the whole Nashville Music Network team working away, but as an introductory sort of interview to kick off this podcast, I think what we all want to hear from the founder, the genesis of this idea, what it means to you, and what ultimately you think it means to the people who are going to be impacted by it, listeners, viewers, that kind of thing. So why don't you just take us through what the idea is, first of all, and then second of all, how it kind of came about.
Yeah. Well, I think the word founder is an interesting word because I think that accurately describes the genesis of this, finding it. The way that I love to think about creativity and things being created is not that dissimilar from, there's like a famous quote about creativity that Steve Jobs gave. It's like creative people feel guilty because it's just kind of connecting things.
Right.
And I think for me, this project is one of discovery, like finding it, not necessarily creating it, maybe curating it. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm in the Nashville area now, but I'm not from here, originally born and raised in Pennsylvania and grew up in a really blue collar town, raised by parents that my mom was a nurse, my dad was a truck driver, but I was a creative kid and, they loved music. I loved music. And, growing up, it was like, when you're in a, small town in PA, like there's not a whole lot of, entertainment outlets, creative, music, TV, film. And so, yeah, I was a drummer in a band. And when I was 17, I bought a one-way ticket from Baltimore to San Francisco, kind of chasing this rock and roll dream. And so, anyway, man, to make a long story short, bounced around the country, went to Full Sail University, thought I was going to be in the music business, ended up in the advertising agency world for a decade, and then live entertainment company for another decade, and moved to Nashville the summer of 21 for what I thought was, a job opportunity. And it was, but life kind of got turned upside down. We got here, moved my wife, 3 kids, and a dog away from our hometown and into a place where we didn't know a whole lot of people, and living in a hotel because we couldn't find a house, and found myself at one of the lowest, darkest places, just wondering, like, what did I do? And it was through the kindness of a neighbor. Like, we finally get into a house, it's a bedroom too small, and we get this invitation from our neighbor to come over, like, hey, we've got live music at our house once a week, and come over and meet some folks. And I'm like, this is going to be super awkward. Like, if you ever fly in and out of the Nashville airport, there's a place there called Tootsie's, and there's always someone playing live music. And, you kind of feel bad because you walk past and like no one's really paying attention except for when they finish a song and it's like the courtesy clap, But, we're like, okay, so we go and we walk in, but it wasn't that. It was something really different, and immediately recognized there was something different in the room. There were 3 stools, 3 acoustic guitars, wine, food, and of course it's Tennessee, so whiskey. And after some time, this guy gets up and welcomes everybody. And everyone sat down at attention, like in silence. And I was like, okay, this is different. And he introduces what this is, and it was my first ever exposure to something called a Nashville Writers Round. And I had never heard of it before, been in and out of Nashville, but, you kind of forget that so often these huge songs that we know that are played on the radio weren't written by the recording artists that released them, or at least not entirely. And so I came to find there's these amazing songwriters all throughout Nashville that play these shows in venues, in homes, it's kind of the Nashville thing. And so I just became really captivated by it, mesmerized by it. I was like, I have to do something with this. And so the last, 2 years of my life have been spent trying to bring this thing to fruition, trying to figure out a way to help more people across the country experience this thing that really what I believe is Nashville's most prized possession. It's songwriters and this really cherished, treasured, format of being able to kind of strip everything away and just kind of come together in what are called listening rooms here and being able to listen and hear the stories told by the people that wrote these songs and hear the songs played by them. So that's what Music Night is really about, is helping people across the country experience that same thing that I experienced in that house for the first time.
Man, that's inspiring because it's easy to think of music in general as just sort of the backing track to everything that we do in our daily lives, and I started to rediscover, I guess, as a musician for years and years, and just stepping away into starting businesses, and I started to rediscover what the power of great music and great scoring really was as our boys started to get older and they
Mm.
were listening to like they were watching all the Marvel movies and just as they got older and got interested in their own media tastes, and to hear our oldest son talk about how incredible the score was for a movie that he loved. It really kind of surprised me. Not because music wasn't important to me and so I couldn't imagine that it wouldn't be important to somebody else, but because it was a very specific thing that he called out, that the experience, the cumulative experience of the whole movie was made better and made great because of the music. And that sounds, it sounds obvious. They give awards for, those compositions, but it just reignited in me the memory and the realization that there's more to music than it's in the background while you're working, or it's in the background when you're at the gym, or it's in the background when you're at the grocery store. And so to dive really deep, all the way down to the guy who had the idea to begin with, the woman that had the experience, that she sat down and wrote this song, and it meant something very deep to her. But because it was so specific, and you and I have talked before about this quote, that the more specific your art is, the more relatable it'll be to a broader audience. And that seems counterintuitive, but it sounds to me like what you experienced in that writer's round was being able to relate to an individual who was telling the story about why their song, the genesis of their song, and that immediately captivated you and took you to this place where you knew it wasn't just going to mean something to you, it's going to mean something to, you know, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Music is in a, really peculiar place right now because it's available everywhere all the time. Endless streaming on any device. It's, on the speakers in the grocery store, it's like you said, background, everywhere. And so it's really put a strain on those that create it. And especially so on the songwriters, just the way that, sort of the monetization models work behind the scenes, how songwriters get compensated and so forth. And so I think, one of the things that gripped me about that first night and every writer's night that I've been to thereafter is, the authenticity of it, the sort of genuineness of it, the uniqueness of it. Like you can't get it anywhere else. And just the sort of basic laws of economy say when something is in shorter supply, it's of higher value, right? And so I think what I've discovered in this particular format, in this place, and I hope that others, experience as well, is that it's something that's really special.
Yeah.
That you can hear music a lot of different places. You can experience music in a lot of different ways, but this is very unique, and to be directly connected to those that wrote the songs. And the thing that really stood out for me, Michael, is the storytelling.
Mm.
They're like, people are going to come, hopefully, because they love music, and there's going to be lots of it. But there's something really powerful about the stories that are told that were the inspiration that led to the songs. You're getting to hear the life events that unfolded. Like people, these writers, they're not just like making up stuff because they think that it's going to be what sells, right? They're not just like making up things because it might sound cool. These are real people that have lived real lives that were, maybe not that dissimilar from me. And that when I left and bought that one-way ticket, like you're chasing this dream, right? Like they're like, I don't know, I got to get to Nashville. You come to Nashville and you think that like, something's going to happen as soon as you get here. And what you find is heartbreak and heartache and dead ends and like, oh no, this isn't going to happen. And you give up on the dream. And then all of a sudden, something changes, something shifts, and they tell these stories. It's like all of a sudden, they're sitting in a Waffle House somewhere, and here comes the waitress singing the song that's playing on the jukebox, and she has no idea that they're the ones that wrote it,
Right. Right.
And like it's just amazing. And so the stories really add a whole new kind of dimension and value to the experience and to the songs.
Yeah, I love what you're bringing up there because what you're really talking about, it sounds like to me, is vulnerability. And, as a songwriter, I have a very difficult time being open about things that I've struggled with in my life or things that hard times that have come along and how that impacted me emotionally. Like I even have a hard time sitting across from, my therapist or my wife or somebody like that and saying, here's how I'm feeling. Because I just, it grates on me to even think about sharing that. But I can write songs about that. And I can write it in such a way that maybe it's thinly veiled, or it almost is. What I find myself doing a lot in songs is I'll use the word you and I'll make the song about somebody else, but every time I use the word you, it's really me, you know. And if I'm forced to tell the story of that song before I play that song, it's almost like an on-ramp into a level of vulnerability that's hard for me to engage off stage or, just in a normal conversation. And I think what makes people, it's like what you're saying, what makes people so seen when they listen to a song is that the writer is engaging something that's universally human, but again, very specific to their experience. And that specific sort of exposition of small experience becomes a shared experience, and I agree with you that's why songwriting and songwriters are so important, and it's important for them to be valued, and not put on a pedestal, but highlighted, and featured. And so, for you to be now featuring these songs, these songwriters in a way, in a format that gives everyone the opportunity to hear the story and to feel that emotional tug and that engagement is just, it's awesome.
But yeah, there's it's interesting here. One of the things a word that I've used to describe kind of music and songwriters and craftspeople here in Nashville is there's a reverence. There's a reverence that exists that maybe isn't in other places. People come here to listen. It's like not just the band that's in the corner of the bar that you're trying to like talk over and have a conversation. And songwriters, I think, are largely undervalued, underappreciated, because they're largely unseen. We as kind of general, just music consumers or music fans, we don't have album liner notes anymore, right? There's no like you're looking through the notes as you're like listening to the music, and you're kind of like you're listening to music and looking at the artwork. Like it doesn't really exist. We're listening to music while we're doing 100 other things, and you're lucky if you can find like the button within one of the platforms to see like who actually wrote the song.
Right.
And so, this for me is really just giving a platform to people that deserve it, not necessarily even asking for it. They're not demanding it. It's just that they want to share their stories, and they want to connect with people. It's not that they necessarily are looking for the accolades from the waitress at the Waffle House, to know them. It's more about the thing that connects us, and that's really, what this format does. I mean, I see it every single time in any room that I'm in at any writer show. You're connecting not just with the songwriters, but you're connecting with each other in that room. And, it's because of the storytelling and the sharing, and, it's what music does. But that's our hope. People have asked, why movie theaters? Like, why not just like live stream it, somewhere? And I would say because we want to create a place, a space where people can, as much as possible, experience what you're experiencing in the room when you're here, in Music City. And so this is kind of second best, right? And movie theaters are designed to have the best picture, the best sound, and people coming together to hear stories together. And so, that was a big part of the inspiration of what Music Night is, and what we're trying to accomplish.
So now that you kind of shared that, for those who may be watching that haven't seen the announcement and don't quite understand the mechanics of this whole event, why don't you just very specifically and explicitly tell us what the dates are, what's going to happen, how people can engage with it, where they can see it, just some of the logistical details so that people can fully understand the awesomeness of the whole experience.
Yeah. Saturday, March 8th, we are broadcasting live from Nashville into movie theaters across the country. And we are going to be inviting people, wherever they are, to essentially step inside of a small venue in Nashville through, going to your local movie theater. And the show is called Music Night, live from Nashville. And it's going to be hosted by Bobby Bones. If you don't know who that is, he's a nationally syndicated iHeart radio host. He's been on and won Dancing with the Stars. He's written 2 New York Times bestsellers. He lives in Nashville, loves songwriters. He's a songwriter himself, I believe. And so really excited to have him, be our host and kind of guide the night. But what we're doing is having 3 of Nashville's most accomplished hit songwriters come and share stories and play the songs behind the hits that they've written. And so, yeah, the format is called a Nashville Writers Round. And so Brett James, Kelly Archer, and Matt Jenkins, between the 3 of them, they've written over 40 #1 hits by 20 different recording artists. I think it's 2 CMAs, a Grammy, and they're just phenomenal storytellers and songwriters. And so wherever you are across the country, we're going to be live at 7 p.m. Central, and it's going to be live in every time zone. So 5 o'clock West Coast, 8 o'clock East Coast, and we're going to be broadcasting in real time and inviting people to be able to experience this really special, magical music experience.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I personally, I can't wait. I think it's going to be an incredible experience. So how many theaters is it going to be in? How many markets are you going to be hitting?
Yeah, well, this is all part of the journey right now. So, the way that it works, so our partner, distribution partner is Fathom Entertainment. I've worked with Fathom for several years now, and love their team. And they're celebrating 20 years and really have pioneered this unique space of kind of what started as event cinema, and really bringing special events into movie theaters. They've now become kind of a full, theatrical distributor, the 9th largest. But what happens behind the scenes right now, so today's Monday, January 20th, and the public announcement is going to be in 2 weeks, February 4th. So if you're watching now, a little bit behind the scenes, behind the curtain of what's going on. But Fathom is out right now offering this show to their network. There are 1,100 theaters across the country that are equipped, outfitted to receive this live broadcast signal. And what happens is they all decide, are we going to carry this? Or are we not going to carry this? So we're hoping for 800 locations. I mean, it'd be great to have all, 1,000 of them. It just, typically doesn't work that way. But Uh, when tickets go on sale and when it becomes public on February 4th, all of the locations will be available on Fathom's website, and you can go in and find a movie theater location that's close to you, and you can buy tickets, directly from AMC, Regal, Cinemark, or an independent theater. You can buy them through Fandango. And then what will happen is, after it becomes public, as the days get closer and closer to event day, more theater locations will be added. So if there isn't one close to you, call your local
Yeah.
theater and, say you got to carry this, please.
Yeah.
There's a lot riding on this. We don't have big empathetic donors. There's no big corporate dollars behind this. This is us, like a very small team, scrappy, trying to bootstrap this thing, together ourselves. Very, very independent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the best way. There may be more effective ways to do things, but there's certainly not more exciting ways to do things. And
Exciting is one word to describe it.
well, we could say thrilling in the sense that you're on the edge of your seat and it's quite a ride.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing was initially pitched as a series.
Okay.
When I discovered this format and was thinking about the fact that there are multiple hit songwriters. I mean, dozens of them here in Nashville, and not only that, there are l- dozens of amazing venues here in Nashville. The way that it was designed, and the way that I pitched it to Fathom was, hey, what if we did not one, but what if we did multiples? What if we did a series once a month, live from Nashville, from a different small venue each month, and a set of three different songwriters, and really bringing something that people could come to expect as a special thing once a month, in movie theaters, as a special Saturday night live broadcast from Nashville. And, they were receptive to it, as were others that I was, trying to bring along. The challenge with the series is, like, it costs a lot more. So really what this is, Michael, we haven't, published this, or really talking about it, but it's a bit of a pilot. It's like we've got one shot to prove that we can do this on screen, that it is going to translate, and that there's an audience for it, and so there's a lot riding on this one night, and so it is exciting. I can say that, at least in this moment. I think it is thrilling. It's also, terrifying in
Yeah.
many ways. I have knocked on so many doors to try to get so many people to kind of rally around this, and they have. I mean, it's amazing the community support, between those that are sponsors, Nashville City, Tennessee State, Coca-Cola Consolidated, our community kind of marketing partners, and CMA has come along, and Gibson Guitars has come along. And so it's amazing, that they have said, "Hey, we believe in this. We believe in you. We're going to help." And so I think that's what his, at least, giving me a decent amount of the courage to keep going, is like, there are people that have said, "Yeah, we want to see this through." But there is a lot riding on it. We don't know what's going to happen, and so it's a bit of a nail biter, behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me personally, I'm excited to see when others take big risks. You know, people talk about that phrase, swing for the fences. It's actually not the smartest approach when it comes to being a home run hitter. Baseball coaches and those people will say, well, you don't really want to swing for the fences. That's not just, go all out, go for broke. But there's something inspiring when you see somebody who sees an opening and, they're not just wild out there, just swinging it every which way, trying to make something happen. But to see, I've known you for many years, and to watch you take all of the experiences that you've had and the lots of different careers, if you will, and overlaying them and weaving them together to find and then create, this opportunity, um, not just for yourself but for everyone involved, is inspiring. And like you say, the evidence that you think you have something here, the evidence that this is probably more than just something you're curious about, this is more than just a pet project for Dean, is the fact that you do have so many, um, corporate sponsors and representatives of these brands who see the potential in it and want to get involved. Um, you know, just keeping up the energy to keep pushing and contributing to a groundswell of excitement that will then hopefully lead to, broad acceptance of the idea. For those of us who are creators, that's always exciting to see somebody work that hard to make something cool happen. Um, yeah, because most people, most of the time, we look out at the world and we go, I can't. How could I ever make something like that happen? We need people to inspire us.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the whole intent of this. I think what we don't need is more information,
Right.
right? Like we're overloaded with information. I think really what we all need is a little dose of inspiration, and I'm inspired by creators. I'm inspired by you, Mike. I've been a fan of you and your music for, a long time. And, I'm inspired by the songwriters here. I'm inspired by people that are making things and doing things, and, I've wrestled for a long time too with like, I don't know, what am I supposed to make? And I've spent most of my career as an employee at a company, and I made a transition after moving here to Nashville. And was like, okay, am I going to go get a job somewhere, or am I going to create something? And it wasn't because I was like on the hunt for an opportunity to try to capitalize on something. It really wasn't that. It came at a moment that was the hardest, darkest time of my life. Like feeling really lost and not really sure what to do. And when I walked into that living room and the experience that I had, I'm like, for whatever reason at that moment where I was, I'm like, it really meant a lot to me. And I hope that that's what this is for other people. And so, man, it's such an interesting balance trying to protect the integrity of that and yet manage all of the mechanics of like the financial model and like how it works and all the logistics. And I think I've grown a greater appreciation for, songwriters, musicians, artists, creators. It's like you want to be able to do the thing that you love, in its most pure form. And yet, if it's going to provide for you, as your primary means, like it has to be commercially viable, which is almost like a gross thing to say about, the thing that you're making. And what a wrestle it is, what a wrestle it is. And, I'm learning a lot about that right now. And so, man, I've never been an entrepreneur, I've never owned a company. And it's like, well, now we've had to create 3 companies in order for this thing, to work the way that it's supposed to. And so, yeah, I'm learning a lot about what it means, to lead creatively, to make good, wise, sound business decisions, but also, not take your focus off of the thing that was the inspiration behind it, and man, it's a real challenge.
As a writer that I really like, Simon Sinek, he talks about, with entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to be the dumbest guy in the room. Where, if you, are constantly acting like you already know everything, then the chances of you learning what you need to learn decrease exponentially. And, exercise for him is to say, I forgive me if everybody else here already knows this. I need to be clear on something. Please explain to me how X, Y, and Z works. And, you know, I I'm a BSer. I like to be the one who comes in and knows everything, and I can say things in such a way that makes people go, "Oh, this guy really knows what he's talking about." But a great exercise for me over the years has been to be like, I've never, I've never led a company this size before, or I've never worked with a team with this many, individual contributors before, or whatever it happens to be. Admitting to myself that I'm grossly underqualified and that there's
Mm,
a learning curve that goes along with it is, I think, an essential part of making anything happen. Um,
mm,
and I've heard you say, like, hey, we're just making this up as we go. I think a lot of people need to hear the reality that everybody's making stuff up as we go, even as parents, with our kids. I don't know. I've never had a kid this old before. This is the oldest kid I've ever parented.
yeah.
So I think it's a hallmark of anybody trying to accomplish anything, to that they would say, I don't really know, but we'll figure it out.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it is so interesting. I'm finding, I went from, this job to this job to this job. And so you're learning things along the way and you have resources and you've got, uh, company structure around you and, and like you kind of, climb the ranks or whatever. And now all of a sudden the carpet gets pulled out and it's like, well, now how do you create when you've got no resources? How do you create when you have no staff? How do you create when you've got, no in-house legal team? How do you create? And it's like, it's a whole new world. But I
And
think I'm
if you
finding,
want to have a legal team, you got to pay them a lot of money
right.
and coming out of your pocket. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, and, yeah, not to diminish those that are helping us, Kirk, Larry, you know who you are. Thank you. We appreciate the work that you're doing, but it's not cheap. you know, it's
Right.
not cheap. And so I think I'm finding, Michael, like the the capacity for someone to be willing to step into the unknown is directly related to their ability to create something of significance.
Yes.
And man, it's freaking terrifying.
Yes.
Like, it is much safer to remain closer to shore where you can see land, you know? And yet, I was encouraged by my neighbor, actually, who invited us to his house for the live music night, and that night was the inspiration for this, right? And I've talked to him about this several times of doing this thing. And he told me this story of he's actually worked in insurance for a long time and sat in a lot of courtrooms over litigation between things and told the story about these sailors that got into a boat accident. And there was this kind of legal battle between, them and the boat company because the boat company, the boat didn't hold up in this storm that they got into. And at the end of the day, they discovered that the key mistake that they had made, the sailors made, was they tried to head back to shore when an unforeseen storm arose, and the safest place to be would have been to turn around and sail out to sea into the unknown. And you're like, oh man, I was just like weeping, like
Yeah.
listening to this. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how is that possible? And so I have found, I mean, I think you talk to people, it's like that are making things and creating things and doing things, they're venturing out into uncharted territory, and how terrifying it can be and unsettling it can be. And yet there's some kind of relationship between, the ability, the capacity of people to be comfortable in the unknown, right? And their ability to create something of significance.
Yeah. Well, and culturally too, I think we're more and more being driven to embrace the illusion of control. And, having gobs and gobs of data at our fingertips for any endeavor that we want to undertake, the data gives us a false sense of security. And so we think that the more we know, the less risk there is. And the more we feel that way, the less risk averse, or the less the less will to risk we possess. And to your point, losing your will to risk is to lose your ability to create.
Mm.
That, I think, is a very difficult reality to embrace when we live in a world that seems predictable.
Yeah.
But anybody who's gone through sort of any personal hardships will say there's no such thing as predictability. So I love that ship analogy. And I think it's a great place for us to stop and say we're going to be having a couple more of these conversations throughout the month of February as we lead up to March 8th. And I think we're really, all of us, looking forward to what this is going to be and, see what it leads to. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. And we'll meet again for another one.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yep.